Hello, Atmore. It's the Lloyd and Friends show. And now here's your host, Lloyd Alderton.
Okay, this is Lloyd, and I'm talking to you, broadcasting actually on Saturday morning through our local radio station, WGYJ LP. You see how good I'm good at saying that? 93.5 FM. Now, you can also, for those friends that you have who are not within our local broadcast area, make sure you call them up and tell them that they can listen in live by going to the radio station website, www. You really don't have to put the www in, but it's www.light935fm, light935fm, no dots, .com. And then just go down on the page there and you can just tune in live. Now, you should also know that we are archiving all of these interviews. We like to think of this as history because we're talking to, eventually we're going to get around to all the interesting people in Atmore, and you might be here one day. So we're going to archive these. I have a YouTube channel. It's called Lloyd and Friends, and you can visit there and just go to your YouTube and write in Lloyd and Friends. They'll all pop up. So this one will be there as well. Hey, I'm talking to one of my favorite guys this morning. We've been friends for several years. He was just telling me that he's 35, and I said, well, you've grown up since I met you. He had his own business here in town, and I think what first caught my attention was his hat. What's that guy's name?
Oh, probably talking.
Bear Bryant.
Yeah, Bear Bryant. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I want to get shot first. He had on his Bear Bryant hat, and he looks good in those Bear Bryant hats. He's always wearing a hat, and he's a snazzy dresser. Had his own little business here in town, and I stopped by, and we got to know one another and hit it off real good. There's one of my favorite TV comedians, sort of, used to have a Canadian TV show called Red Green. Red used to say, well, if the women can't find you handsome, they ought to at least find you handy. So I was talking to my friend here, Jonathan Thompson. Is that T-O-M or T-H-O-M?
T-H-O-M.
Jonathan Thompson the other day, and Jonathan, like most people, so I don't know really how interested I am. I said, well, Jonathan, you may not be likable, but you are interesting.
Yeah.
And then his wife picked that up and put it on Facebook the other day, and we were just having a laugh about that. But Jonathan is likable, and he is interesting, although he is a liberal. And we joke about our politics. We've stayed friends through the years, even though sometimes we differ on the political spectrum. But he's a smart guy. And be honest with you, I'll take smart over charming any day.
I hope that's what it is, because that's what you got.
Now, Jonathan Thompson, I want you to tell us a little bit about who you are first, and then we're going to get into it. He says nothing's off the table. I'm not going to try to nail him down on any of his politics. We're going to talk about some other things. He races cars, too.
Yeah.
Kind of an odd thing. We need to get to the bottom of that. Got to be something wrong with that.
Well, I don't know how interesting I may be, but, I'm happy to tell you about myself. 35, like you had indicated. And, I think we met, it must have been about 8 years ago now, initially on a joint venture.
Mm-hmm. Time flies.
Time flies, absolutely. But yeah, I've got a wonderful wife that I've been with since we were both teenagers, and I've got two great kids. And I'm in IT, and been working here locally for the same company for just over 7 years now. So
who's that?
Kevin Clausen with Southern Computer Services.
All right. Yeah.
Love going to work every day. And my philosophy was, you got to find something that you enjoy going to work and doing every day, because we've all probably done the ditch digging and other stuff that we didn't enjoy, But yeah, so I run into a lot of really interesting people in what I do. So I really do enjoy doing IT work. And the thing that I really like about that is that every day whenever I go into work, I'm dealing with something completely different than the day before. And everything that I do revolves around critically assessing a problem and coming up with either a standard or a creative solution, whatever may be necessary. But it involves critically thinking about what you're dealing with and systematically thinking about it. So that's always entertaining, and that's what I've really enjoyed. In just what I've done from the beginning of time. Whenever I think back, as a teenager, I think I really always knew what I was going to do, because I was very fortunate. My mom was an accountant, and she, back in the 90s, she was part of the computer revolution, in the everyman's industry, not just in the colleges or whatever, but whenever computers really started coming out. And so...
Was that because she could see the application of it in what she did?
Her book work, she was
forced into it. For me, it was writing. I saw an end to write better with the word processing part of it.
Sure.
But for an accountant...
Yeah, I mean, she was forced into it, because people were, still doing everything on paper up to a point. But then, whenever you're working in these firms, you need to be more efficient. So that's where computers come in.
What year were you born, John?
I was born in '86. So
okay,
I'm fairly young. But
well, the computer revolution, it was just getting hot about then, actually.
Yeah.
So you've pretty much grown up with it.
Really, that really is the case, and that's why I think that I was really fortunate, because the thing that I remember very distinctly was back in the mid to late '90s. She was working on a project doing a website, actually, a very early website for a family business, and so that was the first time that I was ever introduced or had any idea about, what you could do with a computer as far as anything outside of what I was aware of, which was just simple card games and stuff like that. But, there I was learning that you could make things act dynamically on a page, which to me was unheard of. So that really wrapped my imagination real tight and held on to me, and really and truthfully.
So your initial interest, would you say it was more like games, having fun with it, rather than utilitarian?
I think for most people that's kind of where they're at. You have to have something that initially captures your imagination.
Well, see, us older people, we feel like we have to have some reason to get a computer.
There you go.
Other than just having fun. You just can't buy something to have fun. That's kind of a sin. Go to hell for that.
I got you. So, but I mean,
but you didn't go about it that way. You didn't.
Well, now in the late '90s, I did come upon a couple of games that I put a lot of time into, but that was after the initial interactions that I'm talking about. At that point in time, I was already a little more well versed, although still a teenager at that point. Well versed with kind of how things should go as far as computer programs go. I had a very rudimentary understanding of how the things worked on the bottom side or the back end or whatever you want to say.
Now, were they still into the DOS when you came into it?
Exactly. The games that I'm talking about were DOS-based games, and they ran on Windows 95, Windows 98, stuff like that. But they were all DOS-based games. But and to be honest with you, that having captured my imagination kind of stayed with me and resulted, after I had some how shall we say it, some issues in school. Apparently people don't like you saying what you think all the time.
You had issues?
I know, right?
What were these personality issues or
Well, they were issues with me opening my big mouth.
Okay.
And other people not liking that, and them attempting to hurt me. So there was a lot of, suspension.
And this was where? Where did you grow up?
I went to Flomaton.
You were at school at Thompson?
I went to school at Flomaton Elementary and Middle. And by middle school, I think my personality was a little abrasive at that point in time. So that resulted in some issues. So I actually got pulled out and homeschooled. Which, in hindsight, was...
At what age?
Oh, let me see. 8th grade. And you know, you can always think of things in hindsight, but at the time I thought it was the greatest thing in the world, you know. But
You didn't have to go to school
I
anymore.
didn't have to go to school. I got to kind of do what I wanted to, you know, how I wanted to do it. And granted, you know, there was a curriculum, but it allowed me to not do what I was supposed to do and kind of just brush it under the rug like a lot of children would do, you know, if given the opportunity. So
Now I know at that age you would have preferred to just play it on the computer all the time, probably games. But what about your math and science and reading, writing, and arithmetic?
well, yeah.
How'd homeschool work out for you for that?
Well, back in those days, it was popular to do the curriculum on videos, whether it be VHS or into DVDs as they came along. So I was kind of you know, cornered into accomplishing, you know, certain amounts of the video curriculum every day. But what's really sad is that whenever I was in grade school, you know, I was, you know, near the top of my class in math specifically.
Okay.
That was something that I really excelled at. And then what I ended up doing through high school was goofing off and playing on the computer and learning a lot about writing computer programs and everything that actually ended up helping me, you know, in my career.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, whenever it came time to actually make a decision, do I want to go to college or not, then I quickly realized that I was behind in, you know, specifically math. The others I could kind of fake it till I make it. I mean, I'm pretty decent at writing and that kind of thing, but math, I had not grasped some very specific concepts that translate into higher order math. And so what was really interesting is by the time that became evident and I needed to get into college, I ended up having to enlist my cousin, who was in high school at the time, to assist me to get me prepped to be able to get into college. But, you know, I did end up going. And
Where'd you go? Did you get a degree?
well, you really had to take a step back because what ended up happening was whenever I graduated high school, I was working full-time as an assistant network administrator at a small 56K ISP in Bruton that was also doing tech support for all these companies around the country. And
an ISP, internet service provider.
Internet service
right?
provider.
Right.
And
For us old folks.
we're talking about, whenever I say 56K, I'm talking about dial-up modem, you know,
High speed.
old stuff, you know,
Right.
takes up the phone line and makes the
Right.
screeching noises
Hey,
like
I
a
thought-
fax machine does.
I thought that was like marvelous.
But you know, the moral of that story is that as time went on, I ended up moving with that company, but I ended up shortly after that move, being diagnosed with leukemia, and so that in itself prevented me, because that was a 5-year fight. They I think I was really scared initially that I was going to die.
This was at what age?
18.
18.
So at 18, I was diagnosed with.
Did I know this? I don't think you've ever told me.
I'm not sure. I thought that we might have spoke about this
Okay,
before,
maybe I
but
did.
whatever the case, you know, that's a really interesting deal there because my religious, you know, philosophy was kind of in turmoil, as one's may be whenever your life's kind of hanging in the balance, and so. That was a 5-year fight, but it took me out of the job, you know, pool, out of my career path.
Right.
And,
Just stopped you in your tracks right at 18. Wow.
you know, I was in the hospital initially for 7 weeks as they were figuring out what to do with me, you know, so, but that was a 5-year ordeal over time. And by the time that was over with, I was in my 20s, but I had been out of the IT business.
What were you working during this time?
Well, you start taking these intense
Treatments.
chemotherapy treatments, and
Not much left
you
in
know,
you.
it just melts your mind. You know, there's large sections of my life that I don't remember because of the effects. They call it chemo brain, and they tell you that, oh, it should one day come back to you, but you could talk to my wife. There's just large sections of my life that are fuzzy at best, So whatever the case, after I was ready to re-enter the job market, I was kind of the mindset that, not only is it going to be difficult because I haven't kept up any contacts or the necessities that it takes to be able to get a job, in a small town or a medium-sized city. You got to have contacts. You can't just, not unless you've got some crazy stuff on a resume, but I didn't have a resume because I had been out of the job market ever since I was a teenager at that point. And so I felt like I needed to go back to college. So it was at that point in time whenever I started going back to college. And that was whenever I had to enlist the help of my cousin to be able to get me into it. But so, went through that whole process, and I was in my final year, and I ended up coming up about $8,000 short and could not come up with the money. So I had to give that up, unfortunately. I think I had at the time like a 3.8 GPA. So, I was doing okay, but, yeah, I just didn't have the means to be able to do what I wanted to do. And by that time, me and my wife were still together, and, yeah, it was just a situation where my back was against the wall. So I had to get a job that was going to pay the bills, and I wasn't going to be able to do that and go to school full time. Well, obviously I couldn't go to school because I didn't have the money to do that. So anyway.
Well, unfortunately, that is a common situation with a lot of people, including myself. So, just had a brain, because I had a question there. I forgot what I was going to ask you. Okay, go ahead.
Well, no, it was funny because I ended up stocking shelves for quite a while, not a real long while, maybe 6 months. And
the bumping.
Yeah,
your hand. I was just telling you you're bumping the table with your hand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I
told Jonathan I have signs here I would use away, but I don't have a sign that says, quit tapping the table. That's okay. We'll edit it out.
There you go. But so yeah. Ended up stocking shelves, at a grocery store for a while just to be able to pay the bills, doing whatever I got to do to pay the bills. And finally, one day I just threw my hands up in the air and said that this isn't going to work. This is not a career path. This is not what I need to be doing to support my family. So we took what little money that we had set aside over the years at that point in time and took a gamble, and decided to try to open up a shop on Main Street. And yeah, I think that's
about when I met you.
Exactly. Yeah. So now it's all coming full circle. So.
Well, yeah, I thought that was a nice little gig. We needed you, actually. I know Kevin. I remember Kevin for a long time. I knew his father. I went to school with his father. He's a good guy, and Kevin's had his thumb also in a lot of business ventures from time to time, I know. But, yeah, I thought you had a good gig there. I was hopeful for you that it would work out. But having done these entrepreneurial endeavors myself a few times, they're difficult.
Yeah. Luckily I had a little bit of background that probably did help me out, which I know a lot of people in this area do have family members that, have been in small business for themselves. But my whole family, we're all small business owners. So I grew up around it, my grandfather and uncle was a jeweler.
Well, your mother being an accountant, she kind of knew how the numbers worked, didn't she?
So, it was just one of those deals to where I felt like I had, the knowledge on the business side of things, but I'll tell you what, I think I was dead wrong. Whenever I go back and, hindsight's 20/20, it's funny because in what I do now, I focus on what I'm good at. And I always tell people, man, I'm so glad I don't have to chase people for money. I don't have to worry about making sure the bills get paid. I just focus on what I'm good at,
Well, Jonathan, I've known quite a few people who had the good fortune to grow up in a business where Dad started the business, or maybe even Grandpa. and they go off to college. They scorn the business. They don't have anything to do with it. Maybe it's a restaurant. Who wants to be smelling like fish all the time at a fish restaurant, right? So the kid goes out and gets his master's degree or his PhD, and the next thing you know, you see him back at the restaurant serving tables. Because this was a place that somebody could show him, there's a lot of nuances about the restaurant business, food spoilage and menu preparation, all of that. Lots of people start restaurants and lots of people fail at it. But I think it helps if you have somebody to mentor you and show you not only knowledge-wise, but financially. To kind of help you and fund you and give you a salary and get you by. You know?
Yeah.
And I've seen this so many times where young people don't know just how fortunate they are. But when you start out something and you really don't know, then you're going to learn by making mistakes, and that can kill you. Biggest thing, I think people run out of money. Unless you got a pot of money to see you through all those mistakes, then you got to go get what my daddy used to call a regular job.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is exactly, what happened to me. I was very fortunate early on. I was able to sustain that business for about 6 months, based on the capital that I had initially. And there was some income coming in that really supplemented and made that feasible for that time period. And we did sink a fair amount of money, comparatively speaking, into the building itself. It obviously wasn't furnished, and walls had to be put up and repainting, and all the normal stuff whenever you're taking over a space, and so that hurt initially. And I going into that little venture, I thought, well, maybe I have enough to get me 9 months to a year into this. And every magic formula that I had heard of at that point was you need a year. You need enough money to get you through the first year. And so, unfortunately, we ended up coming a little bit short. And but at the same time, I was also very fortunate because just the short period of time that I was in that space, I did have some interaction with some other local people that opened some doors for me. And so, if those interactions would not have happened, I would not be sitting where I am today, because I would have never met you in the context that we met. And I would have.
Did you meet Kevin from that business?
I met Kevin. Kevin walked into the business just as an interested local business owner to introduce himself,
Sure.
to be friendly and all that. And I knew of Kevin only what other people had said about him, and those things are not always nice, But what ended up happening is that another party came in the door months later, and allowed me to participate in a project that you also ended up ultimately being a part of. And it was through
the insurance thing.
Yeah, the insurance thing. Yeah. So wrote some software to manage some people, and that allowed me to interact more with Kevin, and really see his personality, and to meet some other really interesting people. But I wouldn't have had the opportunities, even though I've got a failed business, on my resume. I think ultimately it was a positive experience, because I wouldn't have had the
Absolutely.
these opportunities.
Well, look, I want to. There's a couple of things I don't want to pass over without some discussion. I want to go back to the leukemia. Now you're full cured now. You're 35, so what's the word for that? You're beyond the.
Yeah. So
or is this still something you struggle with?
What they tell you is that if you can make it through the first 5 years, then it's probably not going to relapse.
5 years.
All the statistics say that if it's in remission for at least 5 years and there's no relapse, then it's probably not going to relapse. And so I'm, beyond that now. So I'm probably good to go. And the only lasting effects that I really notice are some very specific things that I won't get into. But, the memory loss from those time periods, whenever I was taking the drugs or immediately before that, that does hurt from time to time whenever the wife says, don't you remember, this happening, or remember whenever your daughter was being born and this happened and that kind of thing. That hurts from time to time whenever you can't recall.
Well, that I can understand that very well because as you probably know, my wife had a stroke back in 2010. And,
Sure.
When you have a stroke, you have brain damage.
Mm-hmm.
You have some neurons that are pathways that are damaged, and you have to rebuild those. And of course, her recovery was nothing short of a miracle in my book, but it is not without some residual effects of it, because
Sure.
you have to rebuild those pathways in your brain. I've never been a big biology guy. I love psychology. I love trying to figure out why people do all the stupid, crazy things they do, especially myself. But when it gets to biology, understanding the brain, I never had much interest in dissecting the frogs and stuff. But when my wife had that stroke, I really had to dig down and try to figure out what was going on with her brain, just to understand what the doctors were saying. And it's just absolutely fascinating how the body's ability to overcome a lot of that stuff. If not fully, but to at least learn how to. It's like if you lose your left arm, you just got to figure out how to do everything with your right arm,
Yeah.
or leg or whatever. And so that's what happens with the brain as well. I never knew this until just recent years. You have two brains, They've actually taken out one half of a person's brain, and they can actually, they're practically identical. You just got to learn how to use the other side. It's not as easy as it sounds, but you can do that. So it's quite a miraculous process.
I think it's really interesting, how far. I'll tell you, the whole experience that I had really gave me, it's really molded, a lot of the ways that I think about a lot of things. And it gave me a newfound respect and appreciation for modern medicine and doctors specifically, and their analytical capacity to be able to take a problem and to solve it. And to utilize what information is available to them, because they don't always have they never have all the information that's necessary. And obviously you're talking about the brain, and from everything that I'm aware of, there's still a lot that we don't know, and they're making strides every day. And whenever we do have a more complete understanding of the brain, I think it's really going to open up a lot of opportunities for different things. I mean, talking about biology, I thought it was really interesting that just earlier today I heard a story about a gentleman that had received a pig's heart as a transplant. Supposed to be the first one, something that they had been trying to do for a while now. And they don't know if there's going to be any extended, rejection. But he was on
This is recent?
This was the news story was from today. So
because I thought like years ago, this Dr. Christian Bernard from South Africa did the first heart transplant. I thought he did that with a pig heart.
You talking about pig to pig or pig to human?
Pig to human. Yeah.
Well, I'm not. I know that based on what the news story was saying, the thing that they had been, the issues that they had had previously was with rejection. But with this particular pig, what they were able to do was genetically modify the pig, and the genes that had produced the rejection tendencies.
Yeah, I think I know that pig. Is that the pig that was on Green Acres?
There you go.
I wondered whatever happened to that pig.
Oh, there you go.
It took his poor little heart. Huh?
If they, if they can get it to where it doesn't reject, then that's huge.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Jonathan, touching on this, and this is a subject Jonathan and I debate science and religion occasionally.
Sure.
What do you see now? To me, I think the older people get, the more religious they tend to get.
Sure.
It just seems to be just the way we go. But you're a young guy, and you're big on science, and you have expressed, I believe, I'm correct, in the past at times that a lot of religion is like voodoo. People or black magic, a little bit of that maybe. And you lean towards science.
Yeah.
You favor science. Do you see science and religion as working together? I mean, do you see a little, or do you see no religion? And the scientific developments, do they have to be, what's the word, without religious influences?
Well, I think that it's a real complicated situation whenever you start, broaching that topic. But ultimately, for me, the scientific method and the philosophy of science are, at their essence, mutually exclusive from any sort of supernatural influence. So you just can't bring faith into science and gain anything. And for me, and this kind of goes back to that appreciation for doctors that I was talking about. I don't really think that I got anything out of the people that were praying over me, nothing that I observed anyway. But the people that were giving me the medications and were running the tests and everything, there was visible effects from that. I got better from that. So everyone around me is religious. And I grew up in a conservative religious environment, but
Were your parents religious? Actively or passively?
Not extremely actively. We didn't go to church on a real routine basis. Although we did, I had my uncle's father-in-law was a pastor, and so we went to their church for revivals and vacation Bible school and all this other stuff. But I think that most people didn't like the questions that I would ask. You start asking, questions that make people uncomfortable about what I would consider to be inconsistencies, in belief systems or otherwise. So
they were a little put off with that.
Yeah. Well,
I've experienced that too. I think this is the camaraderie that I somewhat feel with you, is that maybe we've tread some of the same paths.
There you go. Yeah.
Just because God said so, or because the Bible said so.
Yeah. Well, for me, that none of that works, because everything that I deal with on a day-to-day basis, whether it's talking about making a decision to cross the road or how I approach problems, I guess it's got a lot to do with the way that I think. I think more analytical than, oh, well, I'm just going to believe that this is going to work and we're going to take a shot at it. Now, it's really interesting that I say that, because I'm almost hypocritical, because whenever I took that shot at that business, it wasn't because I thought that, there was some real reason why I would be successful. It was just, stepping out on faith, if you will, that, I could do something better for my family. But in my everyday interactions, I haven't seen any real value in anything faith-based. It's always been.
But that was faith in you, and self-confidence. Pretty much, it wasn't a reliance upon God.
Sure.
God was going to take care of you.
Yeah. So I'll define faith, and I think a lot of people do, as belief without physical evidence. Right.
That works.
That works. Okay.
Yeah.
So so there may be other types of evidence.
Do you concede? What about the miracle idea of a miracle? Something that you don't understand that happens. Doctors don't understand what happened. They say you're going to die and you live. Happens all the time. That science cannot explain. Will you lend credibility to religion for that? Not religion, but God.
It's my personal belief that the only things that we cannot explain from a scientific perspective are things that we don't have enough information about to be able to properly analyze, or we don't have the tools. We haven't developed the processes to be able to bring out the appropriate information. If we had all the facts about everything, we'd be able to tell the future, in other words.
Or perform miracles.
Well, you wouldn't need miracles. There's no such thing as a miracle. A miracle, by definition, right, is something that you don't understand.
Okay, I agree with that.
So,
what about Moses parting the Red Sea? I mean, I'm just going to take a wild leap. You think there's probably a explanation for that other than it actually happened?
Well,
but let's just assume for a minute that it did happen.
Okay.
How would it happen? There would have to be some kind of science involved, you're saying?
Well,
maybe.
What I would say is that people observe things and they describe what they observe. But if you take 3 accounts of the same event and you compare them side by side, they're not going to be identical. Mm-hmm. So whenever people see things that they don't really know the inner workings of, if we both go to a magic show and we don't know how the tricks are done, then yeah, we know that it's a magic show. But if we didn't know that it was a magic show, if we grew up in the desert and had never seen a magic show, then we would just assume that, hey, it's a miracle.
Well, let me, and we're not going to spend all the time on this, but you always fascinate me. My wife had a stroke, as I tell you, and they flew her out to Pensacola, and they said that she probably wasn't going to make it. Mm-hmm. And when they got down there, the doctor said, well, her head is full of blood. She has a leak in her brain, but we can't find it because we can't see it because her head's full of blood. Mm-hmm. And we're going to have to put a tube in her head and drain that out for a week or so before we can even see. Mm-hmm. And once they did see, they decided that they would rush her to Shands Hospital in Gainesville, and there was a doctor down there. We didn't have anybody in this area that could do it, who went in and put what do they call those, little coils in her brain and patched up that leakage. And then afterward, months later, as we went back up for her follow-up checkup, the doctor, a neurosurgeon, real smart fella, like you, he said that do you mind just stopping up there to that emergency room that you stayed in for several weeks? I'd just like for these people to see you because this doesn't happen very often.
Sure.
That you're back in here talking to me. It would just have to be a miracle. So this is something even a smart guy like this neurosurgeon didn't completely understand. He did his job. Mm-hmm. He put the coils in, but even so, most of the time, that's not what happened. So I call it a miracle. Maybe just prefer to call it a miracle, but
sure.
It seems like a miracle, pretty much of a miracle to me. And I could talk to almost anybody and could come up with a story similar to that, and you probably could too.
Yep.
How do you explain those kind of miracles?
Well, let me say this. So there was a point in my life where I was really fascinated by and almost obsessed with, the God debate, the academic God debate. Mm-hmm. The Christopher Hitchens and William Lane Craig and all these theologians and their direct opposites that in academia we're having these academic debates about the God problem or the God question. Does God exist? And I think one thing that I took away from that was no indication that God exists, even with the best arguments that had ever been put forward throughout history, and they're being contextualized with our modern understanding of certain things. But what I did shortly after that come to realize was that religion fills a very specific void for a lot of people. And I really believe that religion is not the worst thing in the world. And there's a lot of people that use it to fill a void that they may otherwise not be able to fill easily. And that allows them to be a positive influence in society. And to me, that's more important. In this particular case, it's more important for that individual to be an overall positive influence on society than for them to have what I would consider to be an accurate understanding of reality. So, take of that what you will, but I would just say that, everyone observes things a little differently because they have access to very specific, in most cases, minute amounts of information. And they have to draw conclusions based on what they have access to. So
okay, that's I told you Jonathan always has an answer. No, to be continued. We'll probably be discussing this till our dying days. But I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that's a very very interesting approach. And sometimes religion does not make sense. It's a faith. It's something you're not seeing.
Yeah.
So, it's to me, I tell my wife all the time, this thing about faith, you've got to choose to have faith.
Mm-hmm.
It's a gift in a certain way. I believe a gift from God. Like when my wife had her stroke, I was down at the hospital, and all the friends were gathered down there, and she was laying up in there, and they would go in one at a time and look at her and come out, and they'd put their arm around me, and they'd say, Lloyd, your life is not going to be the same again. She's not going to make it. Your life's going to be different. And I said, no, she's going to come on through it. She'll be all right. And then later, after about a month or so, I had her in rehab, and I got them to let me bring her home. And they said, you got to watch her. You got to watch her. She can't fall, and, blah, blah, blah. And so, I watched her night and day. Her son called me from South Dakota, and he said, Lloyd, what are you going to do about Mom? I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, nursing home, what are you going to do about that? I said, I'm going to leave her right here till she gets well. And he laughed, and he said, Lloyd, my wife's an RN. She's read the medical reports. She's not going to get better. And I said, oh, no, she's going to get better. And she did. And, I had no trouble. I'm not a great man of faith. Never have been, really. My camaraderie with you is because I'm a skeptic in most things. But at that time, for some reason or other, I did have faith. Never doubted one iota that she was going to get well, which she has. And I've thought about that a lot afterward because I am not a person of great faith. I'm a skeptic. To me, it was a gift. It wasn't anything that I earned, that I worked for, anybody taught me. It was just, for some reason, I believed she was going to get well. And she gives me credit because of that faith. The example in the New Testament where Jesus withers the fig tree, or he raised a person from the dead that was crippled or something. And somebody said, the disciple said, well, how come we couldn't do that? He said, well, for some things you have to pray and fast a little bit more, right? So his faith was greater than theirs. So it brought to my mind, does the choosing to have faith. If you choose to have faith, you say, well, I can't choose to have faith because it's not makes sense scientifically, right? But is there some power that we can't see, that if you choose to have faith that it will wither a fig leaf, or it will raise a dead person, or it would, make the blind to see and the lame to walk? And is that possibly what happened, that my faith wasn't sufficient on my own, but God gave me the extra faith that would, through that faith, help my wife to recover? Is that a viable to you at all?
Well, I think what you got there is you have a very powerful personal experience.
It was that.
And I don't want to belittle that experience, by describing anything that you would perceive as, belittling it. But obviously I have my own understanding about what I think is going on there. But I think ultimately the key takeaway there is something that I had said earlier. Whenever I'm talking with people that, I think, may be religious, I try to go back to this because I think it's important. Religion for me, even though I'm not a believer, it has a very specific place, and your ability to cope with that situation, your ability to last through everything that followed, all that was provided by the psychological benefit that you got from having that faith, from being in that religion, and that's the positive effect. It was positive for you. It was positive for her. It was positive for your entire family and everybody around you. And that positivity on its own allowed for things to happen that might not would have happened, because it's well known.
Would you say then that the attitude, some of the religious tenets, the attitude, this goes to psychology, are religious people happier than non-religious people in general? Now, they've done studies on this kind of stuff.
Yeah, so it's really interesting.
Because do the attitudes that are fostered and preached by religion, do they make happier people?
Well, I
living
really,
by those tenets rather than a more cynical approach.
yeah, I think that they absolutely do. I think people are happier in religion, and if they weren't, then religion wouldn't still exist. But
Good point.
I think what it comes back around to, we all have something that we kind of hold near and dear to us. It's something that we kind of base our existence off of. It's a guiding light, if you will. And I've said for a number of years now, I picked this up from one of those guys that does the debates, and I think that he says it well, and I may not remember it word for word, but he says, how does he say it? He says, I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as I can. And for me, that's my guiding light. And, believing true things that are not positive, by their very nature, is not good for your psyche. I mean, it's depressing, But for me, having access to the truth is more important than not being depressed. So,
well, we can finalize this part of the discussion by agreeing on that. I think it's about truth. Whatever truth is, we have to be prepared to accept it. And,
sure.
And many times, I personally find out I was wrong, especially with my wife.
Yeah, as we do all.
We just have to be able to accept that. Now, I want to quit. We're running out of time, which I knew we would. I want to ask you about a couple of things. Now, you're married.
Yes,
Your
sir.
wife is Mandy.
Yep.
And you have 3 children?
I have 2.
You have 2. Okay,
2.
I thought you had 3. Okay.
2, and we're done.
You sure about that? And how old are they?
Let's see. I have got a 13-year-old now. Oh my gosh, a 13.
The terrible years.
But she's great. She's great. And she really looks after her younger brother who's 10. So, they're wonderful kids, and however you want to say it, we're blessed to have them. And
How about the youngest one? How old is she?
He.
Okay, a boy and a girl. Okay.
Yeah, I got a boy and a girl. He's 11 or 10. I'm sorry, and he's going to be the one that's into computers. So,
Which is easiest?
That's a good question. The good thing is that they.
I had 2 girls, and the youngest was a boy. The girls were 10 times as much. I don't say it's as much trouble as much worry.
Well,
because us fathers, we worry more about the girls.
Yeah, I think that's
boys.
coming for me. I think that's coming in the years that are immediately upon us. So, luckily, thus far, I haven't had that much worry. So I've been blessed in that respect too. So,
and Mandy, I know she's a good mother. I follow her on Facebook a lot, and I see the kids. Does she have a career outside the home? I know she has worked at some other things.
Yeah. So she was working with my mom doing book work, and then we got an opportunity to acquire a business, another business, and so she's running that business day to day here in town now. So. Yeah, we're going to see how that works out.
Wonderful. Now, I want to know about the race cars. How does a guy like you, mother's an accountant, he's an IT guy. Of course, cars are all about IT anymore. But are you you consider yourself a mechanic?
Oh, no. If it wasn't for my father-in-law, there's absolutely no way that I would be able to do anything that I do with relation to a car. It kind of goes back to, whenever I was growing up, my dad was a short track racer. That's how him and my mom met at the dirt track. But later, after, I came along, my uncle and grandfather acquired the drag strip here in Atmore from the Owenses. And I was around it, my entire life growing up. And so I've gone back and forth, just trying to do the bucket list thing, whenever I have an opportunity.
Just kind of got in your blood, didn't it?
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah, I used to, with some buddies of mine, we used to go down to the drag strip in Pensacola there when I was a teenager. It was exciting.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a lot of fun, and it teaches you a lot. I would have never come in contact with a lot of older technology, more mechanical technology, and I've learned a tremendous amount. just by being able to learn how carburetors work and, those older, more mechanical technologies, they teach you a lot of things that you'd be hard pressed to learn in this day and age without, getting your hands on with that type of thing. So I've been very fortunate as far as that's concerned.
I know in true American fashion, good Republican fashion, winning and losing is everything, either winner or loser. So can you make any money at this, or is it all a sinkhole?
You can make $1 million if you start with $1 billion.
Okay.
So, there's that.
Okay, I think I know where you're going with that. It's mostly fun.
It's
And just
100%.
try to keep your nose above the water.
Yeah, if you
pay
can
for all
figure
of it.
out somehow to break even, then you have a major
Well,
accomplishment.
it's like every man hobby, isn't it?
There you go. There you go.
Whether it's hunting or fishing or whatever.
Absolutely, absolutely. But it's one of those deals.
Well, now I know we're not going to have time to finish this conversation, so I got to ask you. You consider yourself a political liberal, don't you? Or no?
Well, so I'm probably the token liberal atheist of this area, or one of the very few. One of the very few. I mean, it makes for interesting discussions. But one thing that is interesting is that I've done a 180 on my politics.
Have you?
I voted for, who was it, Johnson, that was on the Libertarian ticket several years ago. He's still part of the Libertarian movement. I was very much of the Libertarian mindset for quite a while.
I have a lot of friends who are Libertarian who really would call themselves more in the conservative corner than the liberal.
So at that point in time in my life, I consider myself a libertarian because I consider myself fiscally conservative, socially liberal. But what I later came to the understanding of is that you can't be fiscally conservative and make liberal social policy work. It just won't work. So from a pragmatic standpoint, I'm a liberal now. and a pretty progressive one at that. So.
Oh, okay. You said you had changed. I thought maybe you'd come over to the dark side.
Opposite direction.
You were a libertarian, but you become more of a liberal
as I did more research and gained more knowledge.
Now, is all that research, or what caused this? What's the word? Evolving? Do you think?
Well, like I said. You obviously, as you're more exposed to policy specifically, you have to further analyze the inner workings of how that policy would actually not only come to be, but would last 10 years from now. There's no point in enacting policies that are only good for today. You need something that is going to be good for 10 years from now, and so on and so forth. And so in order to figure out, what's going to allow those policies to work, the analysis behind that, from talking about specifically the social policies, that's where I kind of did a U-turn on fiscal conservatism, unfortunately.
Well, don't you? I mean, you are a fiscal conservative.
I was.
You was, not anymore. But don't we run out of money? Aren't we going to run out of money?
That's a complicated thing.
We just can't keep spending.
We keep adding to
the.
We keep adding billions of dollars every single year to the military budget, and we don't seem to run out of money. So, I guess not.
So you don't know why, but you have faith that we're not going to run out.
Somebody has faith. I won't say it's me, but somebody has faith. Monetary policy is really complex.
Let me skip to something I can. What about the border problem? Immigration. You got any quick thoughts on that?
Yeah,
we're bringing hundreds of thousands of people into our country. In the name of compassion and being good.
If I'm gonna paint that with a broad brush, then I would say it makes no sense to run across the bridge and burn it behind you. So you have all these people that are here legally that they really aren't here explicitly legally, other than their families over the years have come here.
Okay, yeah.
And those people were in a very specific situation that allowed them to get here. And basically, some of them come by force. Many of them come by force. But no one seems to, on the conservative side of things, wants to seem to give the same opportunities to anybody else.
But don't you think it's reasonable to have rules for them to?
Absolutely.
I mean, not just come across the border and settle
Absolutely.
and check in at the hospital and get your benefits. I mean,
it needs to be accessible, though. I've got some friends who have gone through that process, originally from Jamaica, and I could not, for the life of me, believe the process that they have been eventually successful in getting through, but it makes no sense. So I think that there's a lot that needs to be done for our immigration policy, needless to say.
Okay. Jonathan, we've got about 3 or 4 minutes here to talk, and as I knew would happen when you and I got to talking.
Oh, absolutely.
In fact, it happens with everybody who comes in here and wonders how in the world are we going to get through an hour. Are you sure? Can it be 15 minutes? No, I promise you. So we'll have to do it again sometime.
Yeah, sure.
And bring you back and talk about some other topics, because I do consider you one of the a true intellectual.
Well, I appreciate that. I don't believe it, but I
smart
appreciate
guy.
it.
Now I know I'm not smart. My wife tells me I'm smart, but I think she just likes me. But in our society, we consider some people smart because they know a few big words. I realized that earlier on, so I went out and got a dictionary and learned a few big words so people would think I was smart, but I really struggled through almost everything else a lot. But I think you have a quick, keen mind, and I'm going to forgive you for being an atheist. I think that's what we Christians are supposed to do, isn't it?
Well, that's what the good book says,
what the good book says. And you're still a young man, so there's still time to change your mind, which may very well happen. But Jonathan Thompson, I love you. I think you're a great guy and a real, asset to the Atmore community.
Well, I appreciate that.
And anything you'd like to add before we... How many minutes? We've got right about 2 minutes. You'd like to make a final testament or anything?
I don't know that I have anything to add. I think we've touched on a lot of interesting topics, and I would look forward to coming back and, further diving into whatever we could see fit to dive into.
Okay. Well, we'll think of something, won't we?
There you go.
Okay. Jonathan Thompson, you're listening to us on Saturday morning broadcast if you're a local person. That's let's see if I can say it again. WGYJLP 93.5 FM, 24/7, and I don't know whether I tell you this is 24/7 gospel music. So you're at the right place.
There you go.
If we're going to get you, this would be the place.
There you go.
And we will also be posting this interview, if not this Saturday, perhaps the next Saturday, but shortly coming up. Listen up. And tell all your friends about Jonathan Thompson, because he's as Ross Perot would say, he's a real interesting person. Thanks for coming by, Jonathan.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Lloyd and Friends Show with Lloyd Overton.